Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale.
A mysterious organization called the Sisters of Sorrow have swept up our three heroes, and it is up to Kara, Saye, and Arnadel to do battle with the forces of evil and financial destitution.
We shall battle with ancient lore.
Take them down with our sharp reflexes.
Hey, did you guys finish the last of the ale?
Venture Maidens is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actual play podcast featuring a cast of 4 lifelong gamers.
Kara, not now. We're recording a podcast ad.
Right. I chop it with my axe.
For gold and glory.
We post our episodes every other Sunday. We've got monsters, treasure, role-playing, a cool plot, and some strange NPCs. Find the Venture Maidens podcast today on iTunes or wherever podcasts are free. Until then, venture away.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I'm talking about character death with Barak Blackburn. He is an amazing game designer who has worked on some really fun and awesome games. And we have a great conversation about what character death means at the table, different ways you can play it, and why you may want to scrap it from your game altogether, or why you may want to have a super gritty game where it's very likely to happen. It is awesome. He's a brilliant person and a fun, kind person. So here is my interview with him. Okay, everybody, now I am here with one of my favorite people and game designers. This is an exciting conversation. So welcome to Tabletop Babble, Barak. I am super excited to have you here. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I guess I'm a game designer. I started out writing a superhero game, Capes, Cowls, and Villains Foul for Spectrum Games. I followed that up with some work for some of the other properties, and then I was the primary designer for RetroStar, which is the game of 1970s sci-fi television. The core mechanic for that game has been used for several other Spectrum products, what we call the intention system. Then I sort of branched out on my own and started doing my own little weird, quirky zine games, I call them. And I've released about, 6 of those complete games in about 2 years. So I'm enjoying that. They're little, anywhere between like 24 and 40 pages roughly, sort of complete games or complete game ideas and sort of stuff designed to be done and recapture the sort of the urgency of zines and that ideal. But I'm proud of all of them as fully realized complete ideas.
Yeah, I'd say you're a game designer.
Yeah. Well, and so amusingly, I did get my start writing for D20 way back in the day, doing stuff for Adamant Entertainment. I did like 3 little micro supplements. They used to do like I think it was like monthly little sort of a newsletter thing through DriveThru/RPG Now. I did a couple things on like genre emulation, and that sort of got me a little taste of it. And I think some of that stuff has been incorporated into various Pathfinder products. So that's how I got my start way back when. So I of course, like most people, started with D&D and D20 type games. So
nice. That's really cool. And was that during the D20 boom, as we say?
It was indeed. I believe that one of I believe it was through like some sort of D20 Modern newsletter or something. But it was fun. I did like, stuff for like D20 Modern, and I did these like, how to do like cool stunts in D20 with like sort of skill checks that, would sort of give you little bonuses to things and whatever. So it was definitely during the D20 boom. Yes.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I was a big fan of D20 Modern back in the day, and that day was not so long ago.
No, it was not. It's funny how much it's changed, but how much it hasn't in such a short period of time. So
yeah, definitely. And one of the things I think that hasn't changed is the topic we're talking about today, which is character death, right? I think there's a lot to be said for character death as a dramatic moment in the story and that sort of thing. And we're going to really get into it because I think it's a big part of many, many RPGs. But first, tell me a little bit about your Kickstarter and how that sort of relates to the topic we're talking about.
Like zines way back in the day, you create in a bubble. So I started doing these little zine games, and you can, if you stop by like an Indie Press Revolution booth at, a big convention like Gen Con or whatever, and they have various subsidies that sell games at various conventions. You might see them. They're little weird books. I was creating in a bubble, and I heard about this Zine Quest thing, which is being run through Kickstarter, and their fellow in charge of games, who's Luke Crane, who did the Burning Wheel game. I guess he's their sort of head of games, and it was designed to sort of have people create more zine games. And I'd heard about other people creating stuff and doing weird little niche projects. And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. And usually my design process has been like, oh, I'll, finish that game I was working on. So this is sort of giving me motivation to do something, an idea I've had for a while. And my goal is very minimal, like literally it's just enough to cover my costs, and sort of, to get a little print run out and have that be done. So I'm really excited to sort of see the other projects people are doing. And I've actually started a website. It's sort of self-serving, but what I would really like it to be would be a sort of a one-stop shop for people, not a shop, but a one-stop place to go to find out about all these other cool zine projects that people are doing. And I'm hoping to reach out to the other publishers and say, hey, I'd love to promote your product and have a place where people can go to find these cool things. Because unlike, say, a D&D book that you can literally find at Target now, these are not games that are necessarily going to be on shelves, but people are taking great pride in them. And I would love to sort of get that out there as I go way back in the zine days when zines were a thing. So that's my goal with this. And, we'll see where it goes.
It's cool to see stuff like this on Kickstarter because I think we're so used to seeing everybody has like a giant book that they need, $30,000 or more to fund and that sort of thing. It's great to see like, oh, this is a really cool idea and it's going to come in a format that I think is really awesome and isn't going to be added to the bookshelf. And, how many of us have things on our shelves that we've never read, right? And that sort of thing because we've contributed to Kickstarters. This is just something that I think is so cool and can be added to a lot of games, right? Like you can add this to an experience.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the goal. That the idea for this, it's called Strings, and it's an idea I had a year and a half ago working on the Game Chef idea that was out. So Game Chef's this sort of game design competition that I always try and participate in of late. Just because it sparks ideas for me. And so this was my secondary idea for that. And I've sort of had it culminating here. And I thought, oh, this would be a great thing to do for this Kickstarter, the Zine Quest Kickstarter idea. So, the goal is that people could use it for any game where death is on the table, is what I would say.
Which is a lot of RPGs.
It is a lot of RPGs. And part of the neat thing, what I like about zines is that, you've worked on books that are in hardcover, but you can't necessarily carry a backpack of them around with you at Gen Con and hand them out to people. Like if I see you, I can hand you my product and I haven't really lost a whole lot. And you can be like, cool. And you can put it in your pocket. You're not going to be like, oh, here's my book. It goes for $40 or whatever. And you know what I mean? And it's heavy. You don't want to be walking around all day. Zines are cool. And what's cool about them is I can hand them out and people can trade them and you can do cool stuff. And I like the idea that you can sit on the train on the way to, if you have a job in an office somewhere and you can read it and be like, oh, that's cool. And you get this sort of something that you can read in, half an hour or an hour. So.
Yeah, you could, like if it were Gen Con, you could hand it to somebody, they could read it over their lunch and then use it in their game that afternoon, right?
That is the goal. Yes, exactly. So that's what we're looking for with this one specifically.
Why strings? What was it about this concept that grabbed you that you thought, I need to make this?
So I forget what the actual theme ingredients were. Let me see if I can find them for Game Chef. So do you know what Game Chef is? Have you ever heard of it?
I do not know. What is Game Chef?
So Game Chef, like Iron Chef, it's one theme. So they give you a broad theme. They give you 4 ingredients, and then you have 9 days to create a game. And then you submit it for peer review, and they have a winner, but as with anything, it's not really who, I mean, yes, I'm sure it'd be cool to win. I would love to have won. I can't lie to you and say like, oh, I don't want to win. But it's also, I enjoy it just as a experiment for like, what can I do with this? What can I do with these ingredients? Where can it make my brain go? Imagine sitting somewhere, being a painter and saying, you only have these 3 colors. What can you do with them? So the theme was borders, and the ingredients were yarn, echo, smoke, and cut. So the game I put out for this was this game about DJs making mashups and trying to sort of unite people and bring them together in a country divided by sort of literal borders. Imagine if they took a part of a state or county or whatever and said, everyone here likes country music. We're going to make this a country area.
Wow.
These people.
Okay.
So DJs would come in and sort of mix and match. So that's where I went with it. But then I had this other idea. And so it came from this idea of like the border between life and death.
Oh.
And the string, the yarn that sort of you hold on to, or it's the yarn that, sort of wraps around your neck, if you will, not to get too grim, but we are talking about death. But then also this idea of the echo of sort of the echo of your life, and as you look back on things. So
nice. Wow.
So that's where my brain went with these things. And so this is idea I've been thinking about for a while, and we can talk about it. I don't want to give too much what it is, because literally it's a pretty easy idea.
And then people have it, right? Exactly.
Then people have it. Yeah. And again, my Kickstarter is not much. It's $5, I think, to get it, and that gets you a print copy. $1 gets you a PDF. So if you like it, you can back the Kickstarter for literally $1. And I know most Kickstarters like, oh, $1 to support us. $1 gets you the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Like
you get something for $1 in this one.
You get the product for $1. But we can talk about sort of how those themes go together and sort of what the ideas were. But I like the idea of just talking about death in general, which you brought up, and I was like, oh, and I've been thinking about that and sort of how I got to the place where I got, and not just from these ingredients, but just about death in general. And we can share stories and tell tales of campaigns if you like.
Yeah. So. It's one of the most fascinating topics to me, because it is, like, let's take D&D, right? Because I think in D&D, it's seen as like, oh man, death, the be all, end all, the worst thing that can happen to your character. But then it's also this thing that you can very easily kind of come back from, depending on how you've died and how many diamonds your friends have and all that kind of thing. And so one of the things that I'm wondering is like, how do we make death something that is meaningful in our games, but then also, something that if you don't want to play a game that is deadly, 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 right? Like, where is that balance between death feeling like a real threat, but then also not making your players feel like they need to be cautious and press everything with a 10-foot pole before they interact?
Sure.
With it, right.
And again, that's also, different games deal with death in a different way. So my superhero game, death is off the table,
right?
Just because, like, I like the idea that superheroes don't kill. You know what I mean? That we do this like back and forth of like, that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a very sort of gold and silver age ideal of like, that's superheroes, they don't kill people. So in my game, death is off the table there. So, but in D&D, death is on the table, and so how far back does your D&D go? Like, to what edition are you going back to?
Oh, I go back to second, but I have played them all since I have gotten more interested in D&D. Yeah.
Okay, so in second edition and first edition especially, I think third edition somewhat as well, and I haven't played as much fifth edition to know the ins and outs of it, but death was a thing, and there were spells that could raise you. There was also like your reincarnate spells, which, the druid got, and oh no, but I came back as a turtle. So you're like, oh, that sucks, I'm a turtle fighter.
So good.
But those were also very high level spells that you couldn't really, there was your sort of your price point of like when those were actually available to you. You know what I mean? Like, do we, like, are you raising from the dead a 5th level character? What about a 3rd level character? Right? So that's where, like, it was sort of not problematic, but there definitely was a like, is that really on the table? And did the GM want to use it? It was like, oh, well, there's a big price to pay. Whereas I think in later editions, it's more expected that it's going to be a little bit more common, if you will.
Yes, definitely.
So I don't know. So I do want to go on a slight tangent here. And so Death is on the table, and I do want to ask you about campaigns you've run, and I can talk about campaigns I've run. And not just one-shots, but campaigns, because that's where I think the issue gets really weird. But so did you play a decent amount of 4th edition?
Oh, yeah. I played 2 campaigns, levels 1 through 30.
Wow, that's amazing. So I played a lot of it. I really liked 4th edition. I loved the way sort of combats worked and felt. And then I used to do I forget what they called this, sort of the challenges. So it would give you this thing and it'd be like, you have 20 rounds to do this one thing. And like they gave them to like game stores. Did you do any of those?
Oh, yeah. So they had like lair assaults, right?
Lair assaults,
what they were
that's
called?
what it was, yes. So the lair assaults, and I would do those, and I had a great time doing them. I thought those were great. I mean, it was basically like a board game. You're not really role playing, but it's a lot of fun because 4th edition was a lot of fun. The first time that I ran one, though, I got so I had strategies I would use depending upon stuff, but one of my 4th edition strategies is always like, oh, you have to take out, don't divide your attacks with your monsters. Like take out the spellcaster or take out like someone who's presenting a big problem to you. And the worst way to do that was to have your monsters coup de grace the heroes. And you've never seen a look of horror as when you say, oh, I'm going to coup de grace you. And the player's like, you can't do that. And I say, why can't I do that? You can do it. Like it's expected that you do it. Why can't I do it?
Right.
But you can't.
Exactly.
That's not fair. Why? It's an action. Like you were down for a round, your allies could have gotten to you. Like if I don't do that, you're going to get up because that's the way 4E was designed, that you could go down and get back up again.
Right.
So, and the player's like, no, that's not fair. And I was like, maybe not. So I wanted to start with that as sort of a thing of like, is it fair? Is it not fair? Do you know what I mean? Because you go in, you wander into a monster's lair, and it's just kill everything, right? I mean, Is that sort of what D&D is in many ways?
Sure. Yeah. That's the murder hobo thing reads true because I think a lot of times D&D is go into a monster's lair, kill everything, and take their stuff, right? That's not always the case, but it certainly is a lot of the time.
Yeah. Like that's one place where I'm operating from, but then I've taken a step back from it, and as my sort of not my taste in game design, but my world viewpoint has changed. And again, there's nothing majorly traumatic that's happened to me that I could be like, oh, and this and this. I mean, I could tell you recently that I lost a pet, and I had to sort of watch my cat, get like 20 years old and slowly sort of wither away, and that was kind of sad, like that happens. And I can tell you, like, years ago, I was at my grandmother's side when she passed away, and I mean, it wasn't like I was the only one there. She was at the hospital. And that can be sort of like a weird feeling. I was holding her hand, and what's so strange is that you're holding someone's hand and they're alive and then they're not alive. And you can literally tell, like it like instantly you're like, whoa, like that's weird. And I don't mean like spirit. I mean, literally like the blood stops flowing, meaning their hand is just, it stopped. But it sort of, I'm changing my viewpoint sort of about what death could mean. And I think there's this idea that like in D&D, so in your campaign, I would ask you, is death a resource? Like is like dying something that happens? And my follow-up would be like, if I'm playing the cleric of the party and I die and I'm 7th level, what's expected for me next? And that what I imagine would be is that I have to play another cleric.
Mm-hmm. You were the cleric, and we still need one. So go play another cleric.
Unless there were multiple party members that died, in which case then my friend Joe could be the cleric and I could be the fighter because he was the fighter. Like maybe we could swap positions. But you sort of get to this weird point. And if you've had a long campaign that the players are really invested in, meaning that they have earned their way up from 1st level to say 10th level. And you've established that 10th level means something in your campaign. It means they're the movers and the shakers. And someone dies. And then, oh, look, there's a new 10th level character at the tavern. They're ready to join your party. And they just happen to be a cleric as well.
Right.
So I've always found that a weird disconnect with stuff. Like, you want want your campaign to sort of be alive and be this thing, and I've always found that sort of like detaches me from the narrative of it. I don't know how you. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Like,
yeah, I do think that's true, and there's also this thing that happens when a new party member enters who's played by, it's Joe. Joe died last week. Joe's got a new cleric. We have to do this, 20 minutes of should we trust him or should we not?
Yeah.
Or, right? Or the alternative is, yeah, come join us, right? We trust you immediately.
Yes, yeah. We don't think you're evil. You're not at all a spy.
Mm-hmm. Right, because we know, the metagame of that, right? Knowing like, well, we know this is Joe, and we know Joe just wants to play D&D, so we're all going to move this along. And I think there's ways around that, right? Like, I think there's some of the coolest things I've seen done is when someone dies, a character will take up an NPC that the party has trusted. But you're right, if there's specific roles that need to be filled, it's kind of hard to get out of like I'd love to play Fred the NPC warrior, but we already have 2 warriors in the party. What is this going to add, right?
Sure. And again, D&D is also built on that. You do need to have your roles filled. If you lose your party cleric, chances are you need another. Like, it could be a druid, but you do need another healer of some sort to come in and sort of to balance the party out.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I always think about the other resources that go into it, right? Like I feel like one of the things that is supposed to make coming back from death hard, at least in Dungeons and Dragons, is, hey, you got to have a diamond and it's got to be worth a certain amount, right? And a lot of times I think that gets hand waved as like, if you have the gold, pay for it. I like to make my players find it, right? Because I think it makes diamonds more fun to find and more valuable to find. But then 2, you can create this at least a 1 session sort of like, we've got to go find a diamond so that we can bring back, the cleric, right? And so that's interesting. And then the character who died, they get to play a one-time crazy NPC, which can be fun for them, right? So I like that sort of thing to get into those resources. But then I go down these rabbit holes of thinking like, well, okay, let's say it's the real world and magic is real and diamonds are the only thing that can bring you back to life. Rich people are going to be hoarding diamonds, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're going to be alive forever. It's going to be like all those movies where like the rich people like just, inhabit the bodies of younger people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's fun to be had with that of like, looking at your game's rules and playing with how do we come back from death. Or some games also make it just extremely hard for PCs to die, but then once you're dead, right? Like the Star Wars, the Edge of the Empire, that whole Fantasy Flight line, it's really hard to die. You have to get knocked out multiple times basically, then come back, keep fighting, not get healed, and eventually you die, right? Or your spaceship blows up, I guess. And you're
well, there you go. Yeah, like if you fly your spaceship into another spaceship, that will blow it up and blow you up, I guess. Well, and it can be if you are in the middle of a big dungeon crawl or a big mega adventure, and you're deep in enemy lands. What do? Your cleric dies. You bring in the wacky NPC. But you may have to wait a long time to do the other thing. And there's also, and I don't know that it, I mean, one could write a supplement. I could write a game on it. You could write a game on it. Yours would sell. Mine would gather dust in but you could do troop style play, which like Ars Magica did, where you could have every player could make, say, okay, I'm the cleric, so I make my lead cleric, I make a backup cleric, and then I make another character I want to play. And then when my character dies, I play the other character that the party knows already. So you could do something like that as well. But if you're deep in it, like you're on front lines and like the enemy's right there and your friend dies, you're like, well, let's go get the diamond and do the thing, and then you have the idea that, if, someone in your party has the spell, it could obviously be, obviously it'd have to be a certain level to have it, but, that can be sped up the process, unless of course it's that party member who dies and, what do you do then? So that's the basic idea, that like there's this weird disconnect of like, and you have players, you have a campaign that you've played for 3 years and the characters have gone from 1st to 10th level. and there's all this backstory that goes with it, and they have their stories to tell, and they've worked hard to get where they are. And then you have a new player be like, oh yeah, I got to cherry pick my magic items and I'm good to go. So, and obviously what you want is you want the campaign story to be their story, because that's part of your campaign, and the player, you would hope, would have an investment to it, but it can be very hard for the character to feel invested without feeling like, oh, he's just avenging his other character who he didn't know.
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Kobold Press. Thank you so much for your continued sponsorship of Tabletop Babble and so many great DSPN shows. Today, we're talking about Courts of the Shadow Fae for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Intrigue and adventure await you in the Shadow Realm with Courts of the Shadow Fae, a 5th edition planar adventure for 7th to 10th level characters. It's designed by Wolfgang Bauer and friend of the show, Dan Dillon. It pits your characters against the Queen of Night and Magic, who is terrifying. She announces the city of Zobek is hers by ancient right. And that's not all. Not just the city, the people also hers. To save the city and its people, you'll need to confront the Shadow Fae in the heart of their own realm. It's 148 pages, containing over 100 NPCs, a map with more than 60 locations, and more than 40 combat and role-playing encounters. If you're not going to play this adventure as is, which I highly recommend you do, it's super easy to pick apart and put all of the pieces wherever you want in any campaign that involves the Shadow Fae. Raise your status through courtly intrigue and duels of honor to win an audience with the Queen of Night and Magic herself and free the city, or fail and become her servants. You can order Courts of the Shadow Fae for 5th edition at koboldpress.com. That's koboldpress.com. Tell them Don't Split the Podcast Network sent you.
All right, back to the show.
There's definitely something to be said for, I've played a lot of OSR games, right, that sort of harness that 1st edition feel and embrace lethality in a big way. And I do think that there's something to be said for that style of play, right? It is interesting when you are playing in a way where you're like, okay, I need to, you have to describe how you're actually checking for traps rather than just making a roll or that sort of thing. And I think you learn a lot from that style of play. As a cautious player, you learn how to role play things like exploration and combat a little bit more rather than just social interaction role play, right? Like role playing can happen when you're in combat and when you're exploring something, especially if you feel the pressure of the lethality of it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have a thought on that sort of stuff, like, and here I can summarize it for you quickly, that like role-playing games are weird, and like what you described is a weird thing, because at no point is it asked how my character casts a fireball, how I literally create a 10 foot by 10 foot ball of fire that I can shoot. Yet you're asking how I'm going to check for traps. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
My character's a good trap checker. Like, I'm going to do what he would do. Like, why are you giving me a hard time about this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, so, and it's a personal game philosophy of mine. And I'm not saying make it a simple, like, oh, it's a D20 roll. Great. I did well. I think that's a whole other discussion for sort of your immersion idea of like, what do your game mechanics support? But that's neither here nor there. I'm with you with the OSR, and I had a character in a 2nd edition game who I would always carry a 10 by 10 piece of canvas, and I would always carry a 5-pound bag of flour.
Nice.
And, people are like, why? I'm like, well, the flour, if you're, old school D&D, man, there might be times where you run out of food. You're like, I have a bag of flour. Like, I can make bread. I can eat. Like if I'm trapped in that dungeon, I can eat. You can also find invisible creatures by smashing it up on the ceiling.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
And then the canvas, literally, we had a very big character in our party. Like if he died, we could drag him out in the canvas.
Wow.
Or you could make a tarp out of it. You could make a tent.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with you in terms of the role play that, and people would joke with me about it, and I'd be like, but then when we needed it, they'd be like, yeah, get the canvas, like, So I'm with you that there is role playing opportunities there for like your weird idiosyncrasies. Like, oh, and this guy always enters a room this way because of this thing that happened to him. Right. So I'm with you, but I'm with you for the lethality, and what makes those games interesting though. And I trust that this holds true. I haven't played any of the OSR games, which are the games that we used to play. They're just different, but the same.
I would say different rules sets, but a lot of them have all the same D&D spells that you know and love. They have the stats that you know and love, that sort of thing.
But the idea that like in a lot of those games, like, and if you were playing with Gary Gygax, I get the feeling that if your party was 10th level and your character died, he'd be like, roll up a first level character. Like, and you'd be like, what? And you'd be like, that's the level character start at. And you'd be like, oh. And the game sort of supported that. Like, it doesn't, but it does. Like, that was the sort of what you were going for. So you go in full well knowing that, like, this is going to suck if I die. Like, the party's going to be, 10th level, and I am first level with my one magic missile spell a day. Pew! All right, I'm going to hide back here. And then the DM would be like, well, you're not going to get much XP because you didn't do much. You'd be like, what? Like, so I'm with you. Those can be a fun experience. I'm not, and none of this is passing a judgment on anything. But so what Strings tries to do is it tries to bring that role playing into your game to say, okay, so here's this thing that might happen. And so it tries to create an investment. So the basic idea is and I can share the basic idea. And the way I look at it is if people want to give me $1 or $5, they can. If they don't, that's fine. Whatever. Like it's what it is.
I'm going to throw this out there that if you're using this in your game, go throw $1 to the Kickstarter.
Sure, that's fine. Absolutely. Or see me at a convention and I'll hand you one probably. It's fine. But so the basic idea is you have a memory that you hold on to. So so you ask the question, like, what are you holding on to? Why do you want to live? And hopefully it's a good memory. Hopefully it's like, oh, I remember, when I met my wife, we fell in love for the first time, or, something like this. Now, some players will have a memory of like, I must avenge my family. And that's fine too, but let's presume it's a nice warm memory, right? Like, let's presume it's something like, maybe it is because your brother died, but you think of like playing, throwing a stick with your brother because it's D&D. You didn't have a ball or Xbox. You threw a stick with each other, right? So you remember throwing a stick with your brother and how he wasn't as strong as you were, and you helped him when he broke his leg and blah, blah. And it's this really nice, warm, sweet memory. And that's what you're holding on to, right? You're like, I've got to do this thing. Okay, so you tell the story. So you're lying at death's door. We pause. You tell the story, what you're holding on to. What is the string that's tying you to life? What is, as you're lying there, almost dead, what's the vision that's flashing before your eyes? So you have that, but then where the twist comes in is that you then take that memory, which is going to be attached to a virtue, and then you flip it and you assign something negative to it, because memory is not always accurate. We all remember what we want to remember out of life, right? We all remember the good, or we remember the bad, or remember the one thing. My memory of a situation is going to be different than your memory of that same situation. Right?
Right.
So you take this memory of the brother, but then what you don't remember was that your brother was a real jerk and that you broke your brother's leg. Do you know what I mean? Because you guys were fighting and you did it and you felt guilty. So then you bring in this element of the memory becomes a little bit darker as the reality, we stop viewing life through the rosy red filter and we start seeing the real thing. And then you have a choice. Do I want to hold on to this memory that now has this dark side to it? Or do I want to say, no, that wasn't true? And if you say, no, that wasn't true, you're going to pass on. Like, that's it. You hold on to the joyous memory. You meet your beloved, the gates of heaven or whatever afterlife place you might go to. And that's it.
Cool.
You have memory of your wife. And you remember that, she was unfaithful to you and blah, blah, blah. And you guys fought a lot. Or you say, no, that's not true. And there she is. She's waiting for you in heaven.
Wow.
So it's a real simple idea, but it's designed to increase role-playing engagement, because then you might have something new that you can do. And it's just as you said, you have this side quest for a diamond. Now you've got this side quest for, like, I need to go make things right with my brother. you know?
Mm-hmm.
I broke his leg. Like, I need to apologize for that. Cool, great. You know, or maybe that's why your brother became the evil warlord that you're going to find at the end of the adventure.
Yeah, I love that. It adds such a cool layer, and it also makes that moment, right, a difficult choice that I like. You know, I like this choice of like, you're sitting there and you have this narrative thing that you need to decide now. Like, are you deciding that yes, your character is happy, basically, right, and ready to pass on, or are you ready to complicate their life in order for them to keep it? And I love that. That's cool.
Yeah, and so, you know, in D&D, you know, you get multiple, 3 saves?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would say, you know, you make your first, great. And if it's that third one, instead of the third one, then you bring this in. You say, you're not going to make your roll. We're going to do this. We're going to pause for a minute. And then you truly put the choice in their hands. And you say, this is up to you now. You can live or not live.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they live, then you've added your campaign. The engagement in your campaign has increased. Because now the player has something new. And even if the player doesn't do anything with it, you as a GM or dungeon master, game master, whatever you want to call it, whatever game you're playing, has a new sort of string that you can use in your campaign. You can do something. Maybe the brother now comes in as a character and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I think it's a very simple idea, and I'm going to sort of have I'll have some examples, and I'll talk about different virtue systems you can use, because I put some time into this. Like, there's the standard, like, you know, lust, you know, as the vice, and, you know, the corresponding virtue that goes with it. And there's other ones. There's multiple different virtue systems across different belief systems. But the idea is a real simple one, and it's meant to be integrated very easily. Pause for a minute. Everyone can go to the bathroom, get a drink, come back, take a breath, and think about whether or not this character is going to live. And if they live, they pop up. You're like, yes, I've got it. I'm alive. And you're like, awesome. And they've got newfound vengeance in their eyes as they are like, no,
nice.
I must find my wife who's been unfaithful.
And have you used this in your own games?
I have not, because death is not really on the table in my game.
Sure, right, yeah,
yeah. And the one campaign I've been playing for a really long time, and I would do it, but I know that it would be really, really mean to my players, so I don't really want to do it. Like, I like them to sort of, you know, again, because death is off the table, it's not a thing for me, and if you were to interview my players, they would tell you, like, oh, there's far worse things he does to us all the time. You know what I mean? So it's just, we don't even need to roll dice sometimes. Just a character shows up and like, oh, no, stop. Please, not that character.
Well, that's what one of the things I was going to say is, are their fates worse than death?
And that's what I think this can do, is that you can go really dark. Like, you can, and again, there's the talk of, like, consent in your game, and, like, you don't want to push boundaries. And I don't know if we've talked about this. So, in my superheroes game, I was going to do an April Fool's thing. And, you know, I was talking to my players, and I was like, oh, do you guys want to play, you know, 2 weeks from now or whatever? And they're like, sure. I was like, oh, I've got this fun thing planned. And one player said, is it an April Fool's thing? And I was like, I don't know. And she said, please don't do that. It turns out she has a very terrible life experience associated with April 1st.
Oh, wow. Okay. There you go.
So, like, I was like, oh, okay, noted. I will not do that. And so you never know what someone's sort of limits and thresholds are going to be. So this isn't designed to be like, hey, play psychological warfare with your players and ruin their lives. It's meant to be like, you know, hey, we're gonna go down this road. Is that okay? You know, and there's the sort of the idea that, like, you and your players are in agreement that, like, we're gonna get a little dark here. You know, you don't need to go into graphic detail, but, you know, the whole point is to have the memory be less for color and lots of areas of gray in it, and to sort of bring that into play and have them sort of react to that. So that's the idea, that, you know, you have something you want to do. Again, you know, so hopefully, you know, you and your players and anyone who's listening or anyone who reads it will, you know, sort of keep in mind that consent issue and that sort of idea of, like, don't do anything cruel. Like, you know, don't make it so someone's like, I hate you. Like, they can say I hate you with a smile on their face, but don't have it be like, you're disgusting and I'm going to have nightmares. Like, that's not the point you're going for. What you're looking to do is create dramatic tension. You're looking to create drama in your game. You're looking to give yourself some new little plot threads that you can go out there and to have something when you finish that dungeon, the one player's be like, I have to go back to my hometown.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I love that, and that's a great rule for all gaming, right? Is you want to still have your friends at the end of the game.
Well, and that's what I mean. I feel like if I'm a player in a game, and there are times where characters can die, do you know what I mean? And I feel there are times where, like, if it's appropriate, a character can say, you know what, like, I have to do this thing. And remember that I died here. And that can be a very touching moment. That can be like, man, that's when death becomes significant. If you're running, not you, if a game master is running a mega dungeon and there's 50% TPK, like you started with 8 players, and by the end there's, you had 4 deaths, that's a lot. That means that death is, and it's fine if death is that like that in your campaign. But then I'd recommend using my coup de grace rules, and really bringing it to them. Like, if they want a lot of death in the game, do it. But if they have multiple years of engagement with your campaign, taking away their character is the worst thing you can do, and it disengages them from it. I mean, they, as a player, may want to seek revenge, but they're not doing it for their character. They're doing it because they enjoy you as a game master and they want to overcome the challenge you have presented to them.
Yeah.
But if their player can do that, that's even better. And what I like about this is it doesn't break any rules. Mm-hmm. It merely takes away that 50% roll and says, the choice is yours. Here's what we're going to do. And they say, okay, I want to live. Great.
Yeah.
And there may be times where the player may be dead and, there maybe is no roll. And maybe you as a GM might be like, sorry, like, your head got cut off. You're not coming back. Like, like you can be raised, but you don't have a chance to, like, pop up and be like, I want to live. Because your head's over there and your body's here. Like, there are times that happens, and no game system that has death in it is not going to have that as an option.
Right.
Well, I guess the Fantasy Flight game where you have to work really hard to die.
Sure, unless you're in a spaceship, right? And then
unless you're in a spaceship, and then all bets are off, and one bad roll, done. And that's, I mean, and honestly, in the old school games, like the old school Renaissance games, there are things that just, you got a roll of under 15, you're dead.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah, it was interesting to see, right, that in a very short amount of time, really, when you think about games, the pendulum of D&D swing from save or die to, in 4th edition, once per day when you die, right? Abilities where you would come back stronger, and so you would be throwing yourself into the maw of a dragon to try, which was also super fun, right? Like, it's a different story, but it is a really badass story.
And that can be, and there are games where, like, their death spiral works the opposite of way a death spiral should work. Meaning, like, most of the time in Death Spiral, you get weaker and weaker. There are games where you get stronger and stronger as your Death Spiral goes on.
Yeah, 7th Sea does like a combo, like every other condition you get in your, and it's a literal spiral on your character sheet. Every other condition is good or bad, which is great.
Yeah. Well, it's usually it makes the villain stronger or it makes you stronger, I think.
Right.
So, and then there's, I have in my superhero game, there's things you can only do, like when you're, and I don't know, I think 4th edition may have had some of these. I don't know if other editions did. Like, when you're at half hit points, you can use it.
Right.
You can't use it when you're at full hit points, so you need to get beaten up a little.
Yeah, which again, like, all of that is interesting and is an interesting risk reward in game design of itself. So I definitely love that. There's so much still we could talk about. Coming back wrong, I think, is one of my favorite things.
Oh yeah, no, and that could be, you could do something like that with this too. Like, I wrote a little supplement for Spectrum that's a zombie supplement. That what it does is anytime you make a roll, you're going to roll another die, and the severity of the situation will determine the die that you roll. So if it's like a super mellow situation, you roll a d4. If it's super stressful, you roll a d20. And if the die is high, it means that something bad happens, but you don't know what it means. Now, what it could mean is that something bad happens, and then 3 scenes later, we flash back, and some of the zombie blood got in your mouth. And so you've been infected. You know, and it's not this simple like D&D, like, oh, you failed to save. No, the die was high. That means something bad happened. You've been infected, and we've all seen that in zombie movies. The guy who refuses to believe that they've been infected, or that they're going to fight it over, or they're like, I've just got to stay alive for a little longer.
Yeah. Oh,
so I love that idea too, of like the coming back bad.
Mm-hmm.
You can do something there. And again, you could twist this in a number of ways. Like, okay, you have this happy life, or you can come back and you put your fate in my hands. And I think like Deadlands had that with like one of the I forget what it was called, but there was this whole like you could be like the Risen, and basically like you had more power, but then you were giving the GM fiat to mess with you down the road.
Even Fate has like you can take a one-time really big permanent sort of injury, and because Fate has sort of their 2 damage tracks, it can be emotional or and that is always super fun too, to see like, oh, will somebody take this choice of being emotionally scarred rather than dying, right?
And I think, yes, I mean, that is cool too. And I mean, what it all boils down to is all these games are, and when I run convention games, I always say, hey, let's pretend it's a role-playing game and actually like do some role-playing, you know?
Mm-hmm. And
I'm joking with the players, but the sense like it's easy to get caught up in the die rolling. And sometimes it's cool to just like, hey, let's, you know, and I always say like, I'm going to call you by your character name because it's a role-playing game. Like,
right.
Hey, what do you want to do, Lord, you know, Blackwind? And they'll say, oh, I want to do this. You're like, cool. Like, because you're Lord Blackwind now. That's, you know, and I put little name tags out and everything, you know, and I like that idea. And I like anything that sort of, in my opinion, increases engagement in the role-playing, like, is a good thing, in my opinion. Like anything that makes the players want to come back to play, as they say in the indie game design realm, to see what happens next, you know, like to see like, oh, where's this going to go next? You know, and I mean, that's any game, you know, you always want to, you know, or a movie or any fiction, you want to see like, what's going to happen next? Where are we going to go?
That's a great way to do it. I want to play a game at your table at a convention.
I'm running a game at are you going to Gen Con this year?
We're moving August 1st. So yeah.
I am running a 13th age D&D cartoon game.
Oh, yes.
Saturday morning, I will bring cereal and milk, and there will be the characters to play. I've started statting them up already, and that's what it's going to be. That's my game. So I'm hopeful I get a full table. So my friend's coming, so I'll know I'll at least have one.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure people will definitely check that out. Listeners, go check it out. It's going to be a fun time. I love 13th Age too. It's so good. Yeah,
13th Age is great. And 13th Age deals with death in different ways. And it's interesting to see through the versions of D&D, the different ways they deal with death.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because 4th edition really did make it, as you said, like, it's like, oh, well, the 5th time you die in a day, that means this happens. And you're like, wait, what? Like, you know, how much, and considering that encounters, you know, it's only half an hour of real time, or half an hour of time in the game world when you've had 5 encounters, you know, you're like, okay, we've got to rest for the night, you know, you're like, but we're only 4 rooms in. You know, but how sort of D&D deals with death across sort of the different ways. And 1st and 2nd, I would argue it was much more serious and intense. You know, like 1st edition was like 0 hit points, done. You know, like that's it. You're like, you know, if you were a wizard, a magic user, if you will, in 1st edition, you had from 1 to 4 hit points.
Right. Yeah.
The cat could kill you in 1 round.
I remember it. Yeah. I remember people making that joke about the cat. The most dangerous creature. Oh,
exactly. They're hard to hit, so they're squirrely.
Yeah, for sure. So, where can people find you if they want to find you on the internet?
Well, they can search me on Facebook. My name's pretty easy to find. I have a Twitter account, and like I said, I've started. Well, the main place to find me and find my games, I will do a plug for my new website, is zine.games.
Nice.
And I'll have my games there, and there'll be other games as well. And as I said, I am hoping to be a librarian of sorts, a person who collates this information and spreads it out to other people. For people that know zines going way back, there used to be this magazine called Fact Sheet 5 that had listings of all the different zines that people had, and you could read through it and send people $3 in the mail and a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they would send you their zine back. And so I'm looking to do that for the internet age and find a place for people to collate all these games and find all the cool zine games that are out there. In addition, my Kickstarter, I imagine, people can find it there. It's strings. I'm going to run it. So the Zine Quest is running through the month of February. So my Kickstarter will run through the month of February.
Nice.
And my very ambitious goal of $200 or $300, whatever it was. It's not a lot.
Hey, that's great. I mean, it's pretty ambitious given that you've got some pretty low priced reward tiers here.
I do. Yeah. It's 1, 5, and 10, I think. And 10 is like 2 games, like one of the ones I've already done and the other one. Like, and I literally considered doing the reverse and being like, hey, here's a $20 tier and you don't get anything. You could just say, hey, keep making cool stuff. Sort of like the reverse of the $1 tip jar being like, give me a big tip. So
I love that.
But I didn't.
That's awesome.
I like the idea that, like, for $1 you get something. Like, that seems to me to be the way to go. And my PDFs normally sell for $1.05. So I've reduced the cost by 5 cents.
There you go. Saving a nickel, people.
Exactly. A shiny nickel.
Exactly. Well, I love it. And you certainly have my money. So I can't wait to check this thing out. And I am definitely going to use it at the table. It sounds more fun than death saving throws. Look out, people. I'm going to be killing you so that I can use this supplement.
Or killing you just to make things more interesting, to supplement the lives of their characters in fun and interesting ways. And in the game, I'll use, like, there's a couple movie quotes I use from Memento where, I think it's like, we all have memories that we want to have. We don't necessarily remember, the actual reality of the situation. We all lie to ourselves to be happy, is what they say. And so it's sort of going on that idea of, like, well, you remember this, but that's not quite the way it was. And I think if we all, you don't need to go to therapy, but if you look at your life, we all remember things that sometimes aren't exactly the way they were. And that's okay. That's the way life is, My cat was a pain in the ass for most of her 20 years, but, it was very sad to watch her go.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am sorry about your cat, and I am thankful to you for joining me today. I really appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you.
That was a great interview with Barak. I think he is an awesome dude, and we will definitely have him back on the program. People, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and you can check out all the game design stuff I'm doing at worldbuilderblog.com. Also, do you like this show? Do you like me? Then go check out the Demon Plague Actual Play podcast. We've got it in all the podcast places. Plus, we stream it every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific on Twitch. It is really fun. We are getting into the thick of it. Some awesome guest stars are going to be showing up. So go check it out at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex.
At the center of the great forest, on an island in the sky, the crow, deer, and wolf clans have been training 3 fearsome warriors from infancy for one purpose: to protect and serve the goddess of Estra.
So how exactly are we going to do that? Protecting the goddess, I mean.
Fran lies down.
Leica can't answer because she's too busy sniffing both your butts.
Okay, back off, Wolf Clan.
This disturbs me, but not to worry, I will instantly repress it.
These are the guardians of the goddess. Leica, the tiefling paladin who hails from the wolf clan.
Nobody's touching one beautiful hair on the goddess's head as long as I'm around.
Corbin, a human druid from the crow clan.
Human! I'm a crow!
And Fran, a water genasi wizard of the deer clan.
So, is there a way to quit this job or what?
This unlikely trio will venture forth into an unfamiliar world without knowing who can be trusted against the powerful dark force stalking the steps of their goddess and threatening the future of their world. Tune in every second Monday to Dames and Dragons, a 5th edition D&D actual play podcast. See ya then!